And so I often talk about Mr. Miyagi and say, right, our role as salespeople
Mhm.
or franchisees or whatever, people that are leading businesses is actually to be the guide, be Mr. Miyagi
Mhm.
and be the guide and so that it's not for me. It's not, yes, great. I'd love to have this new package of care and it would add, X percentage GP to my bottom line. Cool. However, it doesn't work for you, Paul, and therefore I need to constantly put you at the center of the conversation
Mhm.
and what works for you. Because if I can get that right, then you will refer me to your friends. You will, come back to me when you do need it, and we will grow together. But then you don't need to pretend to be authentic. You just do what is right for the client. And
My guest is the CEO and founder of a national home care brand in the UK. He is a serial entrepreneur who's built and sold multiple businesses, including an Italian restaurant and another home care company, before starting Walfinch. He's the author of Time to Thrive, The Home Care Revolution, and he's very generous with his wisdom. He shares all online for entrepreneurs like you and me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on YouTube, and on his own podcast, Walking with Walfinch. Welcome to Leadership That Sells. This is the podcast that helps you lead first and sell more. Most teams, sales teams today, they're not really teams. They're what we call teams in parallel. And most managers are still leading them that they're a football team, when in reality you've got a team of sprinters or golfers. And that mismatch is the root of some of your biggest problems. It's coaching that doesn't land, pipeline reviews that feel like interrogations, and your A players are operating as lone wolves. Now, we built a leadership power up for your managers, not another heavy training manual to learn. It's a light, fast reset that gives your managers a simple model to lead the team they actually have. We teach them to set the target with clarity, build the flag with shared identity, and then hand over the map to coach people for real autonomy. If you're ready to fix the model, grab our free parallel team playbook. It's a short, sharp, built for senior leadership guide, and you can find it at the Practical Leadership Academy. Amrit Dhaliwal, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
thank you for having me on the show, Paul.
Cracking to see you here. You've got such a good story to tell. I'm really looking forward to digging into this. You've got a heck of a career. Um, Abandoning university in your rear view mirror, having passed, one hopes, and then said, yeah, enough of this game. I'm going off to work for myself. So your career timeline says to me that you've built quite a few businesses and you've sold them as well. Now, that's from a deli in Richmond, a home care company before the one you started now. If you look back at this, what in those different organizations and in your history about leadership and mindset did you learn that you're applying now as you're building out Walfinch?
It's really interesting. So I was 22 when I bought the deli, and I then ran that for a bit. Had no idea what the hell I was doing, and converted it to a more fine dining Italian restaurant, and also started another unit there, which was a tea room. All before starting this care business, and it was really interesting looking at the staff that I had in care business and the staff that I had in the restaurants and tea rooms, because actually the genre of the software was very much the same. It was paid by the hour. It was really understanding what they needed and what they wanted from me. And I think the biggest thing I've probably learned in that time is around empathetic leadership. And that's not about just always being nice and never having a
Mhm.
hard conversation, but actually it's about saying, well, okay, you've got something serious going on, or I understand your motivations behind something, and we're able to then unlock a key there because I'm able to unlock your motivations and drive so that we're all running in the same direction.
I love that. I'm a great proponent of strengths-based leadership, if you can call it that, right? Which is trying to build on people rather than fill in the gaps. So you're really bad at this, so we're going to hammer you with the thing you're really bad at because that's going to be fun, right? And yes, of course, there's toxic stuff or there's damaging stuff like you can't add up. You're running a till and you can't add. This could be a thing we should fix. But mostly, if you're good at something, I'm going to work with you to make sure you're really good at that. Because then I've got a team of triple A stars rather than B's and C's. And that the A stars are the ones that make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
You're talking empathy here. You're talking empathetic leadership. when you're dealing with people on a day rate or an hourly wage there, what sort of challenges you did you come across? S- Give us a story.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's so many different things. I remember when I first got into care, and I didn't really understand that either. I sort of leapt
This
into
is
all
your
these
theme.
different things.
This is
This
your
is it,
theme.
you know.
Applied
I'm
ignorance. Applied
just
ignorance.
pure blind ignorance, just head first and figure it out later. When I first got in, I didn't really realize the way that people operated and the baggage that they came with because of the other organizations that they'd worked in and so on. And there was a simple story that I remember where it suddenly came to light that I had care workers that were getting payday loans so that they could, get through the month, fill up their cars, sort their washing machine out, and so on. And I was able to then sort of have that conversation and have a sort of focus group of 5 or 10 care workers that I spoke to individually, understood what was going on here, because there were different problems to what I had and different problems to the people, my friends had, and so on. And not necessarily issues that I had thought about. And I thought, okay, well, Grace, that is really problematic because I'm giving you £1,500, but you're spending £1,600 on a payday loan. And that's a huge issue because you're never going to get out of this cycle. So we then came up with a solution around that and came up with free lending for care workers and so on and then started rotating and revolving. This is back in 2013. Started revolving this free piece of lending that was going out to care workers and had a system around that and so on. And so sometimes it isn't about empathy in the classical way. Sometimes it's about problem solving, but actually understanding how big an issue that is and thinking, well, okay, if somebody is thinking, well, I can either fix my washing machine this month or fix my washing machine next month, or I can either fill up my car today or fill up my car tomorrow. I mean, these are problems that people live with that are deep, and it's often quite easy for leaders to fix those because you can come up with relatively free or cheap solutions that you can implement pretty quickly.
Mhm. Yeah. So I mean, you're touching on, I think you're touching on, get a lot of trust there. And I think if I had to pull out what I understand as one of the big concepts that you speak about, it is trust. It is this, call it a safe space, whatever you want as a modern parlance. But both, I think, because you have a team of people who are, I'm sure, well paid, but not well paid if you follow on the grand scheme. But then also you are selling essentially a personal and quite emotive product, which is in-house, in-home care,
Correct.
which itself can come with quite a high price tag. How do you, as a leader, deal with that connect but disconnect?
I think I wear lots of different hats.
Mhm.
So my day-to-day now has really moved into franchising and scaling the business through the power of franchising. And so I speak about this a lot with franchisees who are then out there delivering, frontline care with their staff. So it's really about sort of saying, well, have we hired the right person in the first place? Because if we haven't hired the right person, they're out anyway.
Yeah.
I'm all about sort of saying, well, okay, when you're working with me and for me, I will absolutely break my back for you. But actually, you need to be the right person, and there needs to be that. It needs to be the give and take there.
Yeah.
I will absolutely give you everything, but I also expect the same in return. And
Mhm.
it's really saying that we're going to work tremendously hard together to then, fulfill a mission.
Yeah.
And that mission isn't just the Ferrari fund. For me, it's about revolutionizing home care within the UK. And so it's really then saying, have I got a care worker here or a franchisee here or a registered manager that lead these businesses here that actually wants to do that? And it's not just about earning. But But then, on the ground level, you've got issues within the UK where the local authority and the government doesn't pay very well. And so what we've done is actually just morphed our business model and saying, well, actually, we're really focused very much towards privately paid business. And so we've tilted the business in a different direction so that we can then take better quality margins, make more profitable businesses which can afford to pay staff really well. And then that really changes the whole thing. And when we talk to clients and we asking for an increase in rates, we're pretty unapologetic about it because we're providing a good quality service. We'll turn up all the time. We'll pick up the damn phone, and we will also,
That's half the
um,
battle.
well, that's half the battle, and we'll actually send staff that is, happy and
Mm.
wants to be there. And I think a lot of it comes down to then who are you recruiting? Are you recruiting someone that's coming in just for the money and or just for a job, or are you recruiting someone with a mission and a purpose? And I think that for me is really important. Somebody that wants to do the role and in the perfect world would do it for free but actually needs to be paid. And they're the people that I'm really interested in. And if I was getting care for my mother, that's the person I'd want. And also if I'm looking at a franchisee, that's effectively the person I'm looking for that has that outlook of saying, well, actually, yeah, great, I want to build a profitable business. But also I'm looking for something that has real purpose and meaning.
I mean, you've got, I mean, I've just, in the business I'm working with, we're in the middle of just hiring somebody just now. And I think for the first time in maybe 10 years when I've been hiring, I had more applicants, good applicants, than I could even possibly interview. So it tells me something about the job market at the moment in the, sort of the sector that I'm looking at. I know that in the care sector, trying to find good people is hard. And typically in an economic environment where things are, all things being equal, any company typically struggles to find good staff. But I think you're having a bit more of a struggle than most, especially because of the growth in demand in your sector. And I think because of the perception of the roles. And I'm wondering, you are in the middle of, you've got these 12 steps to transformation. I love this. You're actually trying to change, not just run a business inside the world that you've got, but you're trying to change the world. That's a good reason to get up in the morning. So you're trying to reclassify a carer as a professional. This isn't somebody who comes and just helps you with your breakfast. This is a professional who's coming into your home to enable you to live. And your measure of, would I want this person looking after my mum, is about as basic and as human and as clear a KPI as you can get. I'm sure you've got more detail that goes into that. When you are in your book, and just for the audience who is predominantly around sales and sales leadership is what we're talking about, you talk about the very personal and emotional nature of these home care services, and they do come with quite a high price tag. How do you work with your franchisees? How do they work with their sales teams, their people, to sell what is an expensive service like home care, but do it in a way that is empathetic, respectful, making sure that you're building trust with the clients, with your families, without coming across as pushy or insensitive?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I think most of these businesses are the sweet spot for a business that's been running for about 3 years is about £1 million in revenue.
Mm.
And what you tend to find is that the franchisee, the leader of the business, tends to be, not always, but tends to be the kind of key salesperson within
Yeah.
that business. So they're the person that is setting the direction, but also having the meetings with people that referral providers we call them, so your lead sources, and also having the first meeting with a family, and so they're really invested. And I think what's really important for me is having if you do hire a salesperson, it's really making sure that they're invested in the long-term benefit of that client. So when I'm thinking about selling a franchise, if I'm giving someone a commission on selling a franchise, I'm also then looping in that first year of trading so that they don't just sell a franchise, but they're finding the right person to actually develop this business. If I'm finding somebody that is a recruiter recruiting for care workers, I want someone that their commission or the way that they are remunerated is not just associated with filling, putting a bum on that chair. It's also associated with the first 3 months, 6 months, year of that person's work. Because actually, what we're looking for is saying, well, we want someone really productive, but for a longer period. So and having been in a sales world myself, briefly, 8 months of my working career, and really thinking about it. Actually, I was thinking, well, okay, if I was paid to do something, if someone paid me to recruit, I would recruit like a maniac and say, yeah, just fill up some seats. But actually, if I was if my remuneration was associated with not just filling the seat, but also how it looks in 90 days,
Mm.
my sales process would slow down, but also I'd fill it with more of the right people. And yes, great, you're going to also find a bit of that the grey matter that comes in because actually, sometimes you're taking a punt. But 80% of it would be people that I think would actually do a good job. And I think that if you want, as a leader and an owner, the salesperson, then you need to find someone that understands who you are looking for. For example, in my world, I think some of the best recruiters for care workers are astute care workers, that
There you are.
actually have done the role, understand the value set, and what we need to teach them is the right, okay, I need you to make 50 phone calls, and so on. And I think, this whole concept, we talk about it, social care being in crisis and so on. Yeah, cool. That's true, right? But also, I think what is also true is that people just don't hit the phones enough. People don't get out there enough. And I think that, if I had nothing else to do apart from running one home care business, I feel, and when I did, I didn't have a recruitment issue because I just did a higher volume of recruitment. I didn't have an issue with I can't build my business fast enough or hard enough or big enough because I was like, well, okay, so how many meetings do I need to have in a week? Do I need to have 10, 50, 100, 1,000? How many meetings do I need to have? How many conversations do I need to have? Do I need to go door to door? And it's about doing so much activity that you're bored of doing the activity, it is, and at that point you will find where the sweet spot is. And I think for me, it isn't a lack of people or capacity, it is usually a lack of volume of activity that salespeople or business owners or founders have.
You're going old school here.
I truly I believe it, and actually, if I think about it, it's all about the push-ups, right? If you're unwilling to do the push-ups,
You're not going to get the buys.
you will, no one's going to know that we're here. I'm on this podcast today because one of your listeners is going to be interested in changing their life through the power of franchising. And hey, I'm here. But if I wasn't here, then that conversation would never happen, right?
Totally. It could be a combination of I want to try this whole franchise thing, or actually my mum's getting old.
Exactly
Either
that.
way, you
Yeah.
win.
Yeah. But I'm
Doing
here,
multiple
right?
ways of
I'm
winning.
here doing the push-ups when actually I could be watching some Netflix in the middle of the afternoon. So, but I'm here.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And it is, regardless of who you talk to, it does always come down to either picking up the phone, getting out and seeing people. And
Yeah.
I've got this theory of one removed. So I could call it the idea that we communicate at one step removed from where we should actually be communicating. So instead of going out and meeting somebody and having lunch with them, we'll have a 10-minute coffee. Instead of a 10-minute coffee, we'll get them on a Teams call. Instead of a Teams call, a video call, we'll send them an email. Instead of an email, we'll send them a chat. Instead of a chat, we'll send them a text. And you should always we're hiding. You hide.
Yeah.
And there's a generational thing there as well. And I think that it's not a lack of drive or lack of desire, but a lack of seeing the result.
Well, and I think you know, one of the things that I often talk to my teams about is understanding who am I speaking to? What is the demographic that I'm speaking to? What is their personality type? What is the age group, male or female? Where do they live, et cetera, et cetera. And also, what do we know about how they like to communicate? You know,
Mhm.
um, and so there's going to be the younger generation, like to receive a text and will more likely to respond to that than a phone call. The older generation will be more likely to respond to a phone call or a letter or an email than Gen Zs and so on. And it's really understanding how people like to communicate and also saying, well, okay, let's test it out. Right.
Mhm.
So, let's do 100 of these and say, well, okay, great, that works, that doesn't, or 1,000 of those and that works, that doesn't, whether it's phone call, text message, email, different drips, and so on. And I think for me, it comes down to testing things and understanding what works. And when I used to run one home care unit, I mean, we were constantly changing the way that we would approach it. So, am I having meetings in person with these people? Am I doing phone calls with these people? Do I just send emails to these people? And okay, great. Where does my lead flow sit? Right, care workers. So, am I phoning them as soon as they come in? Am I sending them a text message? Do I send them an email? Do I leave it with a robot? What do I do here? And actually, what activity gives me the best ROI? And then let's just do loads of that, do more of that than the competitor. And I think that is for me, and it is basic actually.
Mhm.
For me, I think most businesses that I have run, in fact, all businesses I have run have been really straightforward. And or even if they seem complex on the outside, I've really always tried to think, what are the five things that I need to do to drive this business?
Yeah.
And if I can't describe it to you in five things, and I haven't simplified it enough.
What are the 5 things you need to do to drive your business?
So I think with a home care
Ask me.
business,
Yeah.
it's really straightforward. Really, I think we've got to recruit carers and train carers, and so make sure that we've got good quality people that are operational and running. We've got to network the hell out of it, and understand who is in that local area. That whether it's doctors, nurses, whatever, people that are going to be in front of older people or certainly my demographic, right? Then we've got to make sure that we're speaking to that demographic and
Mm.
actually getting out and meeting them and really getting in front of them and saying, right, okay, I'm going to immediately come and see you, Mr. Morton, right? You're looking for care for your father. Great. You've called me today. I'm going to come out there. And that's that kind of fourth piece. And within my sector, within home care and social care, there is that compliance piece. It's about keeping the business safe, making sure the auditing piece is done. I mean, it is super straightforward. Essentially, four out of the five things are effectively sales pieces, right? And
Mhm.
then one of them is making sure that we can keep the lights on because the regulator is at bay and it helps me manage the whole thing. But I think really it's about thinking about what management system, leadership system, sales system do you use in order to make all those things happen. We use EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, Traction by Gino Wickman. And I think, that has had meaningful change within how I've operated businesses. And if I think about all of the businesses that I've had, I've slowly morphed into using this more and more and more. And whereas now we're sort of fully engulfed in it. And what I find is that each quarter, when we sit down to do a quarterly review, we're able to move the business in a much more powerful way forward because we're actually looking at this and saying, well, this is it. This is what we're doing for the next 90 days. These are the things that will make change.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea. I like that a lot. I said the EOS has been on my mind for a while. I think I need to dig into that one a bit more. A bit more. Okay. If you are working with your franchisees and they are out trying to sell this deeply personal service to people, is there anything you can do to help the franchisees build these authentic relationships? You said point four, you get in front of people there. They need to have a relationship that converts a lead into a client. what do you, is there a strategy? Is there a way that you teach your sales people, your franchisees to do that? Because I think trust is more than everything. You know, you have to be trusted.
So the thing that I often talk about is education.
Mm,
And most people, when they're looking to buy care for the first time, have no idea what the hell's going on. Even people that are from within the sector have no idea what is going on. And so most people need to be educated in some shape or form. And that might be them thinking, well, I needed to buy X, but actually I've told you because of all of the assessment I've done with my 5 or 6 questions here, I've ascertained that actually you don't need to buy this. What you probably need is send mum to that free class that's down the road, have another assessment done with a GP, and actually be anti-sales in many ways,
mm.
and say, right, okay,
Advisory.
yeah, totally be in that advisory role. And so I often talk about Mr. Miyagi and say, right, our role as salespeople
Mm,
or franchisees or whatever, people that are leading businesses is actually to be the guide, be Mr. Miyagi
mm,
and be the guide and so that it's not for me. It's not, yes, great, I'd love to have this new package of care and it would add X percentage GP to my bottom line. Cool. However, it doesn't work for you, Paul, and therefore I need to constantly put you at the center of the conversation
mm,
and what works for you. Because if I can get that right, then you will refer me to your friends. You will, come back to me when you do need it, and we will grow together. But then you don't need to pretend to be authentic. You just do what is right for the client. And I really believe that. I believe that in my restaurant years ago when I said, well, okay, there's this new wine, but actually this other wine's half the price, and it basically is from the farm next door, and
mm.
so on. You know, and actually margins are pretty good on both of those things. So why don't we just push the thing that is right for the client and say, well, some people want brand, some people just want taste. Then we're saying Waitrose little, right? And so it's about understanding the end user and saying, well, what is right for you? But let me give you all the information, let you make the right decision for you.
I mean, I can unpack two things very quickly out of that. One is what I like to call servant leadership. And leading in a sales process, it's leadership that sells. You are leading people to the right answer for them, and you're looking for them to be successful. You in particular, you're building a recurring revenue business.
Yeah.
So recurring revenue is a function of recurring impact. So you have to have that recurrency of the impact so that you can continue to build. If you stop having the impact in people's lives or in their systems or whatever it is you're selling, you stop getting any money for it, right?
Yeah.
So you have the recurrency, you have the impact, you have the value that you're delivering. But then I think also it's understanding that people don't know how to buy. They're not, you're helping them to buy. You're not selling, you're helping them to buy. And that they're on a buying journey. You're not taking them through a funnel. Yes, you might have top, middle funnel, all that sort of stuff. But it's that they typically, whether you're buying enterprise software or whether you're buying home care for your mum or your dad, you've never done it before. Or if you have, it was a long time ago. You don't do it very often. You, the franchisee, the salesperson in this case, are the expert. And if you can turn that, you use your expertise, you lean on your expertise, you have instant authority, you have instant credibility, and you can guide people down the right path. You can guide them down the wrong path if you want, totally. And yeah, I'm sure that there'll be devils waiting in hell for you when you do. But you can be that advisor and make them successful.
I feel like there's no other way, and because any other way is a charlatan, really, in
Yeah.
many ways. And I think it's just let's just put the client first. And I find that when I'm buying stuff as well, when you've got consultants that operate for you, I mean, I've got someone that's worked with me for 4 or 5 years as a consultant, right? And which is, madness actually. But actually, because he's always honest with me, even when it's like, oh, this might end our relationship, but I'm going to be honest. Whereas I've had other people that are constantly selling to me. I'm like, hold on, I just want honesty. If you tell me what is right, and actually, hold on a second, Amrit, that stinks.
Mhm.
Don't do that. That's not right. Don't tell me just because I want to hear what I'm doing is wonderful, that it's wonderful when it's really not. I'd much rather you're honest because we will move the business forward at a much faster pace and in a much healthier way if you're honest with me. And I pay for honesty actually in that situation.
When I started doing consultancy, when I left my last job, I was told that the first job of a consultant is to keep consulting.
Yeah,
So your first job is to make sure that the gig continues.
yeah,
And of course, I did that for a while because you needed the money, and then you realize this sucks.
yeah,
Because I'm terrible at holding my tongue, terrible, and I can't lie. It's like a Vulcan or something like that. It's just like, yeah, that's a good idea. No, no, like
yeah,
that's horrible. Don't do that. Really? But my mum told me to do that. Your mum doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. Oh,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
sorry. But nice knowing you. I'll just show myself out.
yeah.
It's like you mentioned you talk about your Walfinch franchisees hitting £1 million within the 3 years because you give them the tools, the model, and the mindset, right? Can you break those down? Break down what those three pillars mean to you and how you coach your franchisees to success.
Yeah, I think the whole thing's about coaching to success. And if you think about tools, that might look like CRM systems, that might look like workflows, it might look like a sales system, it might look like a pitch deck, it might look like us going out together and saying, right, okay, let's do these meetings in person, and of course all of the paperwork and all of that underpins it. That is the general how-to of the whole thing. And I think actually, I've been doing this for over 10 years now, for over 10,000 hours and done enough of it that it feels boring to me if I was going out to do a meeting like that. And I'm like, okay, I also know that, okay, great. If the first one doesn't go right, the second one will, and that's okay. And I'll just keep going. And so I feel like if I was starting from zero with nothing else to do, and I was building a home care business, I could get that to 1 million pretty quickly because I understand that. And I understand that it is a volume game of handshakes and then all of the things that underpin it underneath that. And that brings me into the mindset, and it's about persistence.
Mhm.
It's about being positive, and that possibility mindset. And I think where most people just don't do enough, and whether that is, they haven't done enough from the care aspect, they haven't asked feedback questions enough, they haven't done enough for the sales piece, they just haven't done enough. It's what you were saying at the top of the conversation, where I should have had a lunch with you, but I had a coffee. And it's exactly that. And it's saying, well, okay, well, what is the next thing? What can I do? And I had a conversation with a member of staff of mine today. Um, and my life is extremely fast paced, and I was explaining to her that it it will only get faster because I'm living 3 years in advance. I'm there and thinking, well, I'm doing these 10 things. Two of them are going to go well, and eight of them are going to be test runs, right? And so my mindset is very much out there and saying, well, okay, future, it's going to value me today. It's going to help my growth, and it's going to be there in 3 years' time when I get to it. And so whether that is socials or the podcast or whatever it might be, and it's then saying, okay, we need to run at pace with that, and it's then saying, well, where am I in that business cycle, and what is the speed, and who are the people I've got with me, but understanding that it's not just me, it's a team effort, and I need to get all of the right people around me so that I can be free on a Wednesday afternoon to film this with Paul Morton, and not have to worry about the day job. So it's really having a values-led mindset. It's about understanding that it is about the press ups and it is about
Mhm.
persistence, but also there's really understanding that leadership piece within that mindset and saying, well, Daniel Pink wrote his book Drive, and it goes really into motivation,
Mhm.
and what motivates people, and that whole piece. I think when we're thinking about mindset.
Mastery, autonomy, and purpose.
Exactly. And it's really just putting your arms around that whole thing. And so you've got your tools and you've got your mindset. And I think really the third piece of it is that kind of coaching led sort of work really, and it's really having that vision of saying, well, where is my business going to be in 3 years' time from now? And so I run on a, as I was saying, the EOS. So we think 10 years. In 10 years from now, we'll be doing 200 or 300 million in top line revenue. We'll be international. We'll have 300 locations around the UK, run through, maybe half of that in terms of numbers of franchisees. Great. Now, where do we sit in 3 years' time? So in 3 years' time, we'll have 100 locations. We'll be closing in on 100 million in network revenue. And then break that down to 1 year. Great. So in 1 year we'll be at 50 locations. We'll be at 30 million in revenue. And what does that look like in 90 days? And then how does that 90-day segment of the things I need to do today? So the things I need to do today might be looking at how my dashboarding looks, looking at have I implemented EOS with my franchisees effectively? Are we driving the guys that are at 1 million to get to 3 million, because that's going to help me get to my 3 year, 10 year goal and so on and beyond. Am I talking to the people about international growth, but I'm not going to be there for 5 years and so on. And it's really understanding all of those things, putting that all together and saying, well, okay, what am I doing today that is going to impact me in 10 years because I've mapped the whole thing out? And who have I surrounded myself with? Do I have the right coach, the right mentor?
Mhm.
Do I have the right, toolkit and the mindset?
That's superb. I love the forward casting, the anticipatory drive that you're aiming for the future and working back. That's a fascinating way of putting it all together. Okay. To wrap this up, what are you working on right now, Amrit? Apart from Walfinch?
Yeah, no, I think my key focus really has been around adding value to prospective franchisees. I think when I bought a franchise as a former franchisee, there just wasn't any information around. And, there was sales stuff, but there was no information really about, well, should I buy a home care business? Is franchising right? How do I buy a franchise? And so on. And if there was information, it was all very dense white papers. It wasn't particularly interesting content. And so I'm really working on trying to develop a whole system around, people like I'm sure many of your listeners who are thinking, well, should I become an entrepreneur? Because I'm an employed exec right now. Should I become an entrepreneur and a founder? If so, how do I know? So I've created a test that you can, 15 questions, and it sort of tells you, well, okay, yes or no,
Mhm.
take the leap or don't take the leap. Very happy to send it to you, Paul, to link to this episode.
We'll put a link to it in the description of this episode.
Super. And then we've got then it's really building the content around that and saying, well, okay, so lots of different streams. How do I build my first million in business? How do I, buy a franchise? How do I get involved in home care? How do I scale a home care business? And really building free content and tools and assets that are really great IP, frankly, for anyone looking at scaling these businesses. My first book came out this year. I've already started working on the second one, which is very much more driven around this and really going into far more detail into how to grow your first million. And so really working through that and saying, well, okay, this is it. This is the manual for somebody.
Wonderful. So, other than Walfinch.com, where can we find you?
So there's wolfinchfranchising.com, which and then wolfinch.com for the care. I'm on LinkedIn, Amrit Dhaliwal. I'm on Instagram, Amrit Wolfinch. My YouTube channel is Amrit the Walking CEO, and my podcast is Walking with Wolfinch. So
All of which will be linked
pretty
downstairs.
great, and I'm pretty easy to find, and always love a chat.
Good. Then, just to wrap this up, if you had one message you wanted to share with the entire world, it has to be anything you like, doesn't have to be business or whatever relevant. 1,000 billboards everywhere. Biggest message you could possibly imagine. What would it be?
That's a great question. So I think talking about business as ongoing from this conversation, I think what I would probably say is something like if you're going to build a business, build one that matters. Don't choose vanity projects. Solve real problems. Help people thrive, and money will follow with that. I think often what we do is run after money. I'd rather say, well, how do we help people thrive and let the money follow? And that's the only sustainable play, in my opinion.
Solve real problems and let the money flow. There we go. Well, Amrit Dhaliwal, CEO, founder of Walfinch, and a generous purveyor of wisdom. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.